Well, all the Dark Tower books are good, but some are gooder than others. Welcome and hello and welcome again to another video. This time I'm returning to the topic of the Dark Tower series. I finished this series back in July. One of my favorite fantasy series so far. So today I'm going to be giving you a ranking of all 8 books in the series. This includes the Went to the Keyhole, which is a kind of in the series but kind of a standalone as well. I will be including that. I won't be including any of the short stories or anything else that includes references to the Dark Tower. Just the main series and then the whatever companion book or whatever. So that leaves us with 8. Obviously these are purely subjective as they are my favorites. I think the Dark Tower series is very unique in that almost everyone has a different ranking in their favorite books. All of the books are completely different than each other, so that's a very unique series. So without getting too into the weeds, let's go ahead and get started with number 8, which is the Went to the Keyhole. I wouldn't feel right putting this above anything else. It's not a bad book by any means, but it's a very different tone than any of the other books in the series. It's got more of a fairy tale kind of a writing style, which is similar to a different Stephen King book, The Eyes of the Dragon, I thought. So it's kind of a different way to read his stories. It's not my favorite. That's probably one of the reasons why I struggled to read this book at the end of the series, was it was just very different and not a very compelling read. It really does not add a lot of context to the series as a whole. It takes place in between books 4 and 5, but most people read it after book 7. I guess my hopes with this book were that it would have tied up something, or built up the world a little bit more, or maybe dived more into Roland's past and his previous content, or maybe built up the villains a little bit more, or just a little more explanation about the state of the world, or something along those lines. But it really didn't add any context to the universe at all. The only exception maybe being Roland and his relationship with his mother, which it doesn't really add a whole lot, but it is a little bit more fulfilling in that aspect, I would guess, to some people. But aside from that, it really does not add a whole lot to the universe, thus giving it my number 8 ranking. So moving on to the series proper, number 7 I have as The Gunslinger, which is book 1. Most likely going to be a lot of people's, maybe not the least favorite, but near the lower rankings on their lists, because it is the first one in the series. It's really a different kind of tone. It was really a different kind of story, originally written when Stephen King was 19. So he was still kind of finding his way. And as a whole, The Gunslinger is a very short read. It doesn't have a whole lot of things going on in terms of plot. There's just a few main things that happen. It's also a very slow read. It's very atmospheric. It's also very strange. A lot of people talk really weird. It's just kind of like a fever dream book. But it is enjoyable. I recently reread it after I finished The Dark Tower, number 7. And I liked it more on my second read than the first. Though the only version I have read is the original. I don't know, old beaten up copy from the 80s or whatever. I have not read the revised edition. I do want to at some point because I think it would clean up some of the things a little bit more than the original would. And I quite enjoyed the first half of the book. Felt like it dragged a little bit more in the second, the chapter or half or whatever. Again, very slow. Not a lot of interactions between different people in the world. Just a few different people in that section. As my cat sneezes. So that's number 7, The Gunslinger. Not a bad book. I enjoy all the books in the series. I'd say that Gunslinger is probably the weakest of the main 9 books though. Just because there's not a whole lot there. It's mainly Roland and a few other people doing a few things. And setting up the events of the entire series. So at number 6 is going to be book number 6, The Song of Susanna. Again, not a bad book, but one that does not really hold up to the others in the series in terms of length or plot or memorability. So The Song of Susanna is kind of in a weird place where it kind of tails off of the end of book 5, The Wolves of the Kala, and it also builds on to book 7, Dark Tower. So it's hard to remember some of those things, which book they actually take place in, whether it's book 5, 6, or 7. As a whole, I think it could have been cut completely or cut differently. To either cut out one book entirely and make the other 2 longer, or maybe cut at a different place and then make an extra book in the series or something. I don't know, it doesn't matter really. But I did enjoy Song of Susanna. I read it in about 2 days. It's a very short read as well. I don't remember how long. Very compelling read. There's not a lot of downtime, I don't think, in that one. The main problems with this book are some of the directions that it takes the series in, which I won't go into. For spoiler reasons, I'm not going to spoil anything in this book. I know it's a little bit late to say that, but better late than never. The bulk of the book is mostly the group in different places doing their own different things. So that's kind of I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, but it's a different thing. That doesn't happen as much in the other books. So, yeah, there's not a lot else to say about this one. I do like it as well. It's just not my favorite of the series, obviously. So with that being said, let's move on to the next one, which is number 5, which will be. So number 5 is Wizard and Glass. We're now getting into the territory of my number 5 could also be someone else's number 1, and that's fine. Again, I enjoyed this book quite well. It was just overly long, overly drawn out, and very slow paced. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that almost the entire book is a backstory. So most of the plot does not involve the main story, but instead a whole different cast of characters in a different time. It does add some relevance to the main story, but it's also very disconnected. And again, I thought it was very slow paced. Thought it could have been trimmed down some. Do you disagree, Sega? What? Do you like this one? Do you like Wizard and Glass the best? And also, I felt like some of the events were rather anticlimactic in parts, which honestly can be said for many books in the series, that they have, anticlimactic events in them. As it is, I think this one is the worst offender of them all. There's a large stretch of the book that's built to building this rivalry between certain groups and certain people, and then in the end, it's all dealt with rather quickly. So there, that is number 5, Wizarding Glass. So moving on to number 4, I think I'm going to go with book 7 here, The Dark Tower. This book was maybe one of the best of the series at some points. It was also one of the weaker entries at other points. It was a very uneven book. Some parts really dragged on quite a lot, and some were rather fast-paced, but they didn't end up meaning a whole lot to the end of the story. And as it is book 7, there's a lot of final events that take place, end game kind of things. I thought those were mostly well done. There are a few disappointments in there, but most of those I don't have a large complaint with. My biggest complaint with the ending is that it's just very uneven, and it goes into a lot of weird places just out of the blue, where it could have easily built up to those things at a slower pace if there had been more books in the series, or things were a little more fast-paced throughout the entire series. As it is, the ending feels kind of rushed, and it seems like there's a lot of different books inside this one book. And then some of the elements that were planted in books 5 and 6 are brought more into fruition here. Whether that's a good or bad thing, it's really up to the reader. I felt that they were better done in book 6 than in book 7. But it didn't detract me from the book at all. That's really all I have to say about this without going into spoilers. And I did go into spoilers for this book in a previous video. If you feel like torturing yourself to watch that 20-minute long nonsense of me rambling on, go ahead. So that brings us to where are we at now? Book 3? Number 3. Ranking number 3, yes. I am very sick, so my mind is very foggy right now. So number 3 in my ranking is going to be The Drawing of the Three, which is book number 2. Admittedly, this is the one I need to reread the most, because the first time I read it, I was completely lost for the first 100 pages or so. I didn't really know what was going on, didn't care for it. Eventually I got back on track. I really enjoyed the latter half, but I do think I need to reread this at some point to get the full effect. But as it is, I think it's a fairly solid entry. Not my favorite, but it has a lot of good things going for it. It's a very unique book, very unique setting, very unique plot, and things that can happen in the book that you won't see in a lot of places. So book number 2, The Drawing of the Three. It's a very unique book. It introduces some great characters, has a lot of funny moments, has a lot of weird moments. I don't have a lot of bad things to say about it. Maybe I would if I reread it again. Well, hello. As you can see, this is a different recording. This is a few weeks later. I've obviously changed clothes. I'm in a different spot. And I'm not sick anymore. So somehow the last couple of minutes of the original footage was lost. So I got to re-record the last 2 spots on this list. So I'm going to do that now real quick. We can get this video over with. Okay, so number 2 on my list would be Wolves of the Kala, number 5. I think this is one of the better entries in the series. I quite liked Wolves of the Kala. It was a very fun book for most of the way. There's a lot of different things going on. I'm not going to go into any of them really, but there's a lot of different agendas or goals for the team as they come across them. A lot of different objectives for them to accomplish in this book. They meet a lot of interesting new people in this entry as well. Some are very memorable, such as Andy and Benny. and a few others. I think it's got a fair amount of action, although a lot of it is a little more slow-paced. But I feel like the kind of interweaving plots kind of are the saving grace of this book, so that the slower parts have some more things that are mixed in with it to, bring up the action, as opposed to Wizard and Glass, which I feel was a very similar situation, where most of the book there was actually very slow and boring, but there wasn't a lot of other things to cut in with it. So the tone of the book is very slow-paced throughout. But I feel like in Wolves of the Kala, there's a lot of different things going on throughout the book. So even when there are slow times, there are other things to look forward to. I quite enjoyed the battles when there was battles. I would actually dive more into the world as well. So that's always good. This one took the story into some weird directions, which are not always everyone's favorite. So there is that caveat there. But as a whole, I really enjoyed Wolves of the Kala. Anyways, so that leads me to number 1, which by the process of elimination, or just by watching any of my previous videos, you will know that number 1 is The Wastelands, book number 3, my favorite book in the series, and one of my favorite Stephen King books at this time. I think it's got the best adventure story of the series. It's got the most unique structure. It's got good setting. It's got a lot of great character moments, a lot of new characters, a lot of returning characters that play a very big part in the story. Lots of memorable moments, lots of memorable villains, lots of great quotes, lots of good references to old literature classics, which will become a mainstay in the series after this. I feel like in this book it was done very well and very well received by me when I read it for the first time. It's probably the most fun I had throughout any of the Dark Tower books. And even though the ending is a bit controversial, I do feel like the ending is still very strong in its own right. There's a lot going on thematically that works very well here as well, that I'm not going to go into either. I don't know what else to say about this book that I haven't said already. I know it's all very vague, but I don't want to go into details too much. Suffice it to say, it's my favorite book of the series, and it's never really even been close. So The Wastelands is number 1, and that concludes my list. It's a very long, arduous journey to get here, much like the tower itself. But there we go, my ranking of the Dark Tower books. So that's all I have to say, really. So if you ended up watching this whole video, I thank you for that, and I will see you next time.